This video is going to be covering, there's going to be two videos over the first portion of the nervous system. The nervous system is huge. In most textbooks, it can be 150, 200 pages, very detailed. We're going to hit just sort of the highlights of that. I think that works better. I think that actually works better in the long run than huge amounts of detail that maybe don't really apply. So one of the first things you cover with the nervous system is that neurons have the ability to conduct electrical impulses. And this first section is covering, there are going to be different types of nerve cells, neurons and neuroglial cells, different types of nerves, and then the structure and function of the spinal cord, including some of the basic pathways of the spinal cord. So neurons have the ability to conduct electrical impulses. Now, to start off first, and this is your outline. Now, remember, you always have a PowerPoint that goes along with this. I apologize for the small writing. Anyway, but there is a lot of information in the PowerPoint as well as these outlines. I try to give you as much as I can. If you want to have a general overview of how a nervous system works, this is a great diagram, and it actually has all three of these elements. To have a nervous system that can function correctly, you have to have receptors, conductors, and what are called effectors. Now, the only one that maybe sounds weird is the effector part. And effectors are either gland, muscle, or organ, and they react to a stimulus. In other words, when an electrical impulse reaches them, they're going to either contract, secrete, constrict, dilate, anything. They react to a stimulus. So, starting here first, now look, this is the dendrites, and we'll get to what those are. But here is a sensory receptor. Receptors are designed to detect a change in something, and they will depolarize. Just like when we talked about muscles, they'll depolarize, and they will send electrical impulses along what are called sensory nerves. Now, this is a sensory or afferent neuron, and this would be the end, and you see the direction of the stimulus. Now, there are different kinds of neurons. We'll get to that. This one happens to be a unipolar neuron. And what this is showing, the central nervous system, this is the peripheral nervous system, this is going into the brain or spinal cord. And then once inside there, you have other connections. These are called interneurons. And you can see here information is coming in, and this might be a reflex, or it may be something going all the way up to the brain to be processed, and then it goes down the brain, down the spinal cord, and then out toward an effector. But here are the interneurons. You see they connect to another neuron. This one happens to be what's called a multipolar neuron. And there's a connection here. Here's the cell body. Here's another connection to an interneuron. And then here's a connection to another neuron. So the sensories are carrying information in this way. Interneurons connect sensory nerves or sensory neurons to motor neurons. So this is a motor neuron. Motor neurons carry information away from the brain or spinal cord. Sensory neurons always carry information into the brain or spinal cord. But here are the conductors, which are the nerves. So conductors are the neurons in peripheral nerves and nerves within the central nervous system, which is what these are. So you have information going in this way. It is then connected to a neuron that's going to then carry that information away from the brain or spinal cord. And the effector is out here. It says muscle or gland. It could be a muscle organ or gland. And the axon terminal, we covered that with muscle, the neuromuscular junction. That one sometimes is called the myoneural junction. But a neuromuscular or a neuroeffector junction is when a neuron is connecting to an effector. So that's a basic setup for a nervous system. You have to have a way of detecting a change, that information being brought to the area where it's being processed, and then you have to have some way of getting that information out to a muscle or a gland. If this were a reflex, this out here would be somebody grabbing something hot. It immediately sends a signal into the spinal cord. Spinal cord connects to a motor neuron, and it goes right back out to a muscle, and a person pulls their hand away. That's how fast that is. So this is actually what is called the components or the overview of a nervous system. There's three parts to it. Okay, so a little information here, and I'm going to bounce back and forth. So divisions of the nervous system. Well, you have two divisions. You have what's called the central and what is called the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system involves the brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is a series of nerves, not neurons. Neuron axons or nerve fibers make up the nerves. But here's some cranial nerves, there are spinal nerves. There's actually 12 cranial nerves. There's 31 spinal nerves. There's the spinal cord. See, there's the brain. So those are the divisions. So the yellow here would be the division of what's called the peripheral nervous system. It's on the periphery. And then right in the middle is what is called the central nervous system. Okay, so central nervous system, let's go on that route. Brain and spinal cord. Brain controls all body activities, contains billions of neuron cell bodies and myelinated axons. We'll get to that. Spinal cord connects the brain to the peripheral nervous system, and you saw that there. Spinal cord is an area for reflexes, and it connects the brain to these peripheral nerves. So when the brain processes something or sends out nerve impulses, it goes down the spinal cord and it's going to travel out along these nerves to whatever their destination is. Now, there are divisions of the peripheral nervous system, and like it says here, there's 12 pairs of cranial nerves. I don't think this will be bolded when you see it. That should be bolded, and then 31 pairs. That should also be bolded, but I showed you that. These are called now spinal nerves. They come off the spinal cord. They travel out to organs, muscles, or glands. Okay, there are two divisions of the peripheral nervous system. One called the somatic and another one called the autonomic. Somatic deals with skeletal muscles, so it is called the voluntary division of the peripheral nervous system. That means a person has conscious control. You can contract skeletal muscles that allow you to move, talk, do that kind of thing. The autonomic is the involuntary division of the peripheral nervous system. A person does not have conscious control of that particular division. And this one is actually split into two smaller divisions. The autonomic is involuntary. You do not have control over that. I mentioned this before. You can try to get your chi going. You can focus with ninja-like concentration like Will Ferrell and Step Brothers, and you cannot constrict your ascending colon, no matter how hard you try. That is under the control of the autonomic nervous system. Only thing we control are our skeletal muscles, and all the things that we process, what we see, things like that. But all right, there's two divisions of the autonomic. There is what's called the sympathetic. Most people have heard of this. It's the fight or flight system. It actually prepares the body for exercise or danger. It's designed to raise heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate. It decreases digestion. It decreases excretion. It dilates pupils. It's getting a person ready to exercise or get out of danger. So that's why it's called the fight or flight system. The parasympathetic division is actually referred to as the rest and digest. It is what is in control during a person's day mostly, hopefully. I wouldn't want to be around somebody who's constantly in their sympathetic nervous system. But that one actually is always lowering heart rate. It's lowering blood pressure. It increases digestion. It increases excretion. We'll cover that in AMP2. When a person voids their bladder gets full. That's a parasympathetic response. I had an instructor say you cannot try to pee while running full speed. I don't know why you'd want to do that, because when you're running full speed, that's the sympathetic division that's in control, and it's pushing blood to other areas and the nervous system in other areas. So anyway. Okay, so cells of the nervous system. Now there's actually two categories, and then you have categories underneath these. There are what are called neurons and neuroglial cells. We covered this in histology. We had a motor neuron, and the little things look like poppy seeds. Those were neuroglial cells. Here is a generic neuron. And also, same thing as in your PowerPoint here. It gives you a little bit of information. So let's just do like the parts of this, and a couple of these are bolded. This is actually a type of neuron called a multipolar, but it's okay. See these little extensions coming off? Now this is called the cell body, and you can see here's the nucleus. That little blue dot there is the nucleolus. Nissl bodies, don't worry about that so much. We're not doing little organelles of a nerve, of a neuron. The cell body is this whole portion here. And then all these small extensions coming off, those are dendrites. And what dendrites do is they connect to either a receptor or another neuron. And in our initial example up here, see the dendrites? Now this is a different kind of neuron, but you see the dendrites are connected to a receptor. Okay, this long part coming off, sorry about the small writing, this is called an axon. And you see the direction of the impulse. The impulse travels, in this case, away from the cell body. Here are the synaptic knobs. Now, in muscle, remember a neuromuscular junction? That's what connected to a muscle fiber were these little knobs, and that's where you had neurotransmitters being released. This particular one happens to be a myelinated axon. Myelin is this little sheath that looks like a sausage roll here. And you can see it says myelin cut. The spaces between that are called nodes of Ranvier. We'll get to that in a minute. But that's the basic parts of a neuron. So here are the dendrites. Important things to know. What are the dendrites? The cell body, and then this part called the axon. Axons are also called nerve fibers. And nerve fibers are what you find in the big nerves. So back to our picture here, see these big yellow nerves coming off? I think most people have heard of this one. There's one that goes down the back of the leg called the sciatic. The sciatic nerve, and there's different kinds of nerves, but the axons of neurons make up those nerves. So the nerves are made of these axon parts. That's how nerves transmit electrical impulses. Okay, nucleus, nucleolus, I showed you that as well. So nerve axons. So in the peripheral nervous system, neuroglia called Schwann cells that surround the large axons of peripheral neurons in lipid-rich sheaths. That's a myelin sheath. The reason it distinguishes the peripheral nervous system is there's a cell in the central nervous system that makes the myelin sheath, and it's not a Schwann cell. We'll get to that as well. The coating is called a myelin sheath. The narrow gaps in the myelin sheath between Schwann cells are called nodes of Ranvier. Now I know they're here. So this whole thing here is your Schwann cell. All right, it's the part that produces the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system. The nodes of Ranvier are the little gaps. See, there's one here. Don't think I have another picture. That's okay. This is kind of a shorter one. There would be another one there. In our earlier picture, all the little parts that are not myelinated, the gray areas, are called nodes of Ranvier. So you could say a node of Ranvier is the unmyelinated portion of a myelinated axon. Or, in this case, it says the narrow gaps in the myelin sheath. Now, this is important. The neurolimus sheath is only part of a Schwann cell. And if you blow this up, you can see this picture, it's blowing it up. Here's the myelin. See the rolls there? And this is the axon. The axon actually has neurofibrils, just like a muscle fiber had myofibrils. That's what those are. But see the myelin, that little area? Now, you see where the nucleus is, and there's a mitochondria. So this outer layer is called the neurolimus sheath. So it's the outside layer of a Schwann cell. And why is it important? It's what allows nerves or neurons in the peripheral nervous system to regenerate. The ones in the brain and spinal cord will not regenerate because they do not have a neurolimus sheath that helps guide the regeneration. So we'll get to that also. Myelinated versus unmyelinated axons. This happens to be a myelinated axon. See, here's the myelin, the dark. The spaces between here would be the nodes of Ranvier, And when a signal is conducted along a myelinated axon, it bounces like this. Boink. It only hits the areas that are not covered by the myelin sheath. And as a result of that, and here's the thing, nerves will depolarize just like a muscle. Remember the plus and the minus, the sodium rushing in, the potassium rushing out. Nerves do the same thing. And so when a signal is traveling and it only hits these areas, that's a small area to depolarize, it speeds up how fast it can travel down the axon. So myelinated axons contain a myelin sheath. They have a very fast nerve conduction velocity, and it's very fast. Think about how quickly it is when you touch something hot and how fast your hand goes away. The term saltatory conduction only occurs with myelinated axons, and it's describing what I was talking about. Saltatory conduction is when the signal only touches what are called the nodes of Ranvier, node-to-node conduction. Only those areas are depolarized. Unmyelinated axon, which is what this is. Okay, so imagine, see this gray here? Imagine this gray not having this myelin sheath, this yellow, just this long gray axon. That's what that's supposed to be. Unmyelinated axons, and I need to point this out, myelinated axons have a white color to them. That yellowish looking, it's actually white colored. The ones that are unmyelinated are gray colored. And I believe, that's some small writing. I didn't mean to give you an eye test. The fact that myelin has a very high fat content makes them white. So myelinated axons, let's do that now. Just leave it simple. How about that? Have a white color. So, oops. Have a white color. White in appearance. I'm going to make this quick because I'm just going to change a word. If you'll bear with me here. This is something I would have gone over in class. Oops. So, anyway, unmyelinated axons, they are not white. They have a gray color, and you saw that. Have a gray, my goodness gracious, caffeine just makes me can't type. Gray in appearance, have a gray color. Would it be crazy for me to make that gray? Because I don't want to spend too much time on this. What's a good gray color? You'll probably remember this from now on because I'm doing this. There's gray. Oh man, we can't do white, but oh well. So just remember see the gray. In fact, it's probably better if I show you up here. See the gray axon? See an unmyelinated, anything that's not myelinated in the central nervous system or peripheral, see the gray color is a gray color. The fact that lipids are kind of white color, just think about how adipose tissue looked. So myelinated would have a white color, unmyelinated would be gray. And unmyelinated have a slower nerve conduction velocity. It's not dramatically slower, but it is. It's still fast. But the whole entire fiber has to depolarize. So instead of it beginning to just boom, boom, hit like that, it has to depolarize the whole thing. It's like it's dragging something. So it's much slower. Now, Schwann cells which are these. This is a Schwann cell. They produce the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system. And the neurolimmal sheaths have a neurolimmal sheath that helps with regeneration of damaged axons. This is a cool word. Oligodendrocytes, or produce the myelin sheath in the central nervous system. In other words, in the brain and spinal cord. And I'll show you those in a second. But, you know, this is one of those things that doesn't make sense with anatomy. So in the brain and spinal cord, a cell called an oligodendrocyte produces the myelin sheath. The problem with those, if they get damaged, they do not grow back. And I think most people know that. If there's damage to the spinal cord or brain to a certain extent, at the moment, it can be permanent. Neuroglia are all different categories of little cells that are active in the brain, and we'll get to those in a minute. Those were the little poppy seeds that were on the histology slide. Sorry, it's driving me crazy. Okay. Greatly outnumbered neurons. All right. So classification of cells in the nervous system. I'll go a little further and I'm going to stop and we'll pick up with the next video. So as far as types of neurons, we just did the parts of a neuron, myelinated, unmyelinated. Now we're going to talk about there are different categories of neurons. There's actually 3. This down here, sensory nerves, motor nerves, and interneurons. And I guess interneuron is a category, but it's one of these 3. But so these are nerves. This is a category of neuron, which they're actually multipolar. But all right, so we'll go through these now. So the unipolar neurons, what do they look like? You go this diagram, and sorry about the small writing. You see this guy over here, it says dendrites, and then that's an extension, and then this part is the part that's going into the brain or spinal cord, and there's the cell body. That's a unipolar neuron. The dendrite part is associated with a peripheral body part, and it transmits impulses this direction into the brain or spinal cord. So it was that one that I showed you earlier here. See, it comes in, there's the little cell body, see it's going that way. That's a unipolar neuron. This one down here is called a multipolar neuron. So the next category, which these are associated with the senses, the eyes, ears, eyes, ears, sense of smell. These are bipolar neurons. See the cell body, it has 2 extensions coming off the cell body, so hence the term bipolar. And like it says here, eyes, ears, and nose, bipolar are sensory neurons also. So these 2 are sensory neurons. They're going to be carrying information into the brain or spinal cord. This one, which is the one I had showed you originally in our neuron model and everything, this is called a multipolar neuron. Now, they're motor neurons. So here are the dendrites. I showed you that. See, there's the nucleus. This is the axon. And you can see the axon on these, right? So this one is sitting, the cell body is sitting in the brain or the spinal cord, and the axons go out to effectors. And they make up the nerves that go out to organs, muscles, or glands. So that's a multipolar neuron. Now, going back to this, a sensory nerve, I've already mentioned this a few times now. Sensory nerves are, of course, made of sensory neurons. It says mostly unipolar, some bipolar. Transmit nerve impulses from peripheral body parts into the brain or spinal cord. They're also called afferent nerves as well. Motor nerves are efferent. Efferent is something that's leaving. Afferent is usually referring to something that's going into something. Motor nerves, which are made of multipolar neurons, transmit nerve impulses out of the brain and spinal cord to effectors that cause change. So last time I'm going to show you this diagram. See, remember we started here and you're carrying information into the brain or spinal cord. So this would be a sensory neuron or sensory nerve. Here are the interneurons, and then the ones leaving would be the motor neurons or motor nerves. Here is, okay, so we went through those, and then interneurons, they sit within the brain or spinal cord, usually connect incoming nerve axons to the ones that are leaving, and I just showed you that. Interneurons will sit, and I'll show you that again before we finish this section. Okay, neuroglial cells or neuroglial cells. I've heard them pronounced two ways. It says there's four. Now there's all different categories. Okay, we're going to do four types: astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, and what are called ependymal cells. So here are the descriptions. You're not going to miss anything. I'm going to go to our PowerPoint. So that page there. Oops. That actually would be a diagram that would be probably need a little bigger, but that's okay. See, so here is a multipolar neuron. See the extensions, the cell body, the cell body, the blue, the nucleus. Here's an astrocyte. Now they have about 50 functions. We'll do the big ones, okay? They do connect neurons, you can see that here, to blood vessels. Here's a capillary, see the little extensions? They look like a star, so that's why they call it an astrocyte. They help break down metabolize glucose. Neurons rely on glucose to conduct electrical impulses, things like that. They do form scar tissue after injuries, so all that's there. An oligodendrocyte are these spaceship-looking cells. They produce the myelin sheath within the brain and spinal cord. They will not regenerate if they're damaged. Microglial are these smaller looking, see that one here and see this one here. They're like white blood cells for spinal fluid. They help clean out and phagocytize things that get inside spinal fluid and the brain and spinal cord as well, but mainly spinal fluid. I've actually seen spinal fluid. Used to work in a hospital, but spinal fluid looks like water. That's what it's supposed to look like. It's not supposed to be orange colored or yellow or anything like that. And then these things that I think look like fish up here, these are called ependymal cells. See the little extensions coming off? And this is a fluid-filled cavity. The brain has something called ventricles that produce spinal fluid, and they control the consistency of spinal fluid. So it says they filter and control the concentration of spinal fluid. So we just did the big four. Regeneration of nerve fibers. Doing this as we're going. Is not replaced. That sounds better. What this is referring to, oh, my dog, is this diagram. So let me show you. This is a damaged axon / damaged nerve. It can happen in car accidents, when you hurt yourself, surgery, all kinds of reasons. Here's the cell body. Now this is a multipolar neuron. Look, this would be sitting in the spinal cord, in the spinal cord. And they could be in the brain as well. And they're traveling along peripheral nerves. So these are Schwann cells, remember? And here's the skeletal muscle. See where it's connecting? That's the neuromuscular junction. So if something happens and this axon gets severed, nerve gets damaged, that part is going to degenerate because now it's cut off from the cell body. And you see how it says the Schwann cell tube extends distal to the injury. That's the neurolimmus sheath that's forming first, and it acts like a guide and allows you to go back and reattach again. So this is a peripheral nerve. They will regenerate because they have Schwann cells, and Schwann cells have the neurolimmus sheath. So regeneration in the peripheral nervous system, yes. It occurs about 1 millimeter or 2 a day. Yes, they will regenerate. Regeneration in the central nervous system, no. Nerves in the central nervous system will not regenerate. Those are oligodendrocytes that I had shown you earlier, and they will not regenerate if they are damaged. Synapse, and this is just a throwback to what we did with the muscle. So here is, now a synapse is talking about, and I can't remember, good deal. Synapse is when the dendrite or axon of one neuron is connecting to the cell body of another neuron. See, here's an axon coming down. See, it's connecting to the dendrite. Here's another axon that's connecting directly to the cell body, and what you have is a synapse. And yes, it looks like a neuromuscular junction, but in the nervous system, they're referred to as synapse, and it's called a synaptic cleft, a little space between that. But that's what a synapse is. So what we're looking at here is a synapse, the end of one axon connected to another neuron, excuse me. So I'm going to make this a little smaller. I got it kind of big. So here is the end. Okay, it's just like with muscle. See, these are neurotransmitters, the blue dots. This is the synaptic cleft. See the pluses and minuses. Nerves depolarize just like muscles do. And when a neuron action potential reaches the end, see, electricity will not jump over this space. It cannot cross it. It makes these little vesicles with the neurotransmitters move to the bottom. They release it into that space, and then they'll go down and bind to receptors into what's called the postsynaptic neuron. So a lot of times you'll see this is called the presynaptic, and this is the postsynaptic. Oop, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, just a real quick again. So as far as cell membrane potential, remember the resting membrane of a nerve cell. Now, if you want to review, we do have, I don't know what I just did, meathead. Here we go. We looked at this with muscle. Remember, there's sodium stacked on the outside. There's more potassium ions on the inside. There's a positive charge on the outside. There's a negative compared to the outside, which is negative. It's just like with a muscle. That's the resting membrane potential. When a nerve depolarizes, sodium rushes inside the cell. It temporarily changes the charge across the membrane from positive outside and negative inside to negative outside and positive on the inside. It's very short. Remember, it repolarizes directly behind that. So nerves depolarize just like a muscle does. And repolarization is when the sodium channels will close, potassium channels open, and it restores the resting membrane potential back. So that's showing the stimulus. Here's sodium moving in, and then that's showing potassium moving out. And that will restore the original polarized charge of outside being positive, inside being negative. Nerves are all or none. They will either conduct an electrical impulse or they will not. So just think of things that are all or none. A person is not almost pregnant. A person is either pregnant or they're not pregnant. That's the same thing with nerve conduction velocities. Nerves either conduct an impulse, it reaches threshold, or it will not. Okay, last part to this, neurotransmitters and neuropeptides. I'm going to have to give you some of these. So when you see this video, you have some that are within the brain. For instance, dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine. Those are all neurotransmitters that are pretty common. The brain has 30 plus. They have tons. The ones outside the peripheral nervous system, acetylcholine, epinephrine also. If you've heard of serotonin before, it gets a lot of, let's see, there's 30 different kinds. I didn't give you, that's okay. I'll give it to you this time. But yeah, serotonin in the brain is linked to depression. Dopamine is linked to Parkinson's disease. So when you see this video, they'll be there. Neuropeptides, if you're following along in your outline, neuropeptides are biochemicals that are produced in times of stress or pain. You have two categories of the ones that alleviate pain. Enkephalins, beta endorphins, those are pain relieving type of biochemicals. They're during times of painful stress, they're there to sort of block those or make them less intense. Substance P is actually the neurotransmitter for pain nerves. Believe it or not, you have nerves in your body that are designed for pain. Pain is there to protect a person or let them know something's wrong. So those blue dots, that could be substance P. And enkephalins and beta endorphins are stronger, or endorphins. They're there to mask, or like it says here, I don't know why. I'm not sure why there's a space like that. produced during periods of painful stress, bind to receptors in the brain. They relieve pain sensations. Enkephalins do that. Beta endorphins do as well, but they are longer acting, and that looks better. And they're much more potent. So I like the way that looks better. I don't always agree with the spell correct on this. All right. So anyway, that's a good introduction. I will start the next video here.